Can you explain your vote at the last council meeting on the federal forfeiture funds being directed to the Asheville Police Department? And why did you vote that way?
I mentioned this a little. Check, 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 check,
Here to
check,
this one.
check. Check. I think it's now and then. Okay. I mentioned this a little bit ago already, so I'll start from the beginning. At the Public Safety Committee, we heard about $419,000 were available through civil asset forfeiture. The ACLU recommends to not participate in this at all because it extracts resources from neighborhoods, usually through the war on drugs. It usually comes in the form of cash, guns, and they work with the federal government to get around the state law in North Carolina. So those funds should go into our schools. But council isn't allowed to say how they should be spent. So I would expect as a council member that one, we would know where the funds came from, unclear answers. Two, that we would know the exact dollar, at least how much of it came from certain areas. That's been typical, by the way. Usually when we have a presentation at Public Safety Committee, it'll say, here's like the heat island of where the most issue is or where the most response to crime has been. So my original ask at Public Safety and the City Council meeting was, hey, we need more information so we can make an informed decision. We unfortunately chose not to bring it back with more information. We went ahead and passed it. Afterwards, I found out that the state statute would have required those funds to go into our schools. But I want to take a step back to June's Public Safety Committee meeting. We have serious issues with violent crime in our community, with intimate partner violence, and with violence among our youth. In June at the Public Safety Committee, we heard from Keenan Lake of My Daddy Taught Me That and Jackie Latek of the JARC Foundation about what is possible in our community around violence interrupter programming and around youth mentorship programming, so we have a relational response to the violent crime in our community instead of a transactional one, which is what we're talking about when we're talking to address the root cause of crime. Our young people feel like they don't have a sense of belonging in this community. There's no good paying jobs. There's no affordable housing. They see their parents struggling to make ends meet. I met with a sustainability club of students a couple years ago. The first question they asked me, I thought it would be about composting or the tree canopy, because I would love to talk about the tree canopy tonight, but it was, do you know what it's like to grow up in Beer City, USA, where nobody's from here and everyone's wasted? And that hit, you know, that's accountability right there. Our young people are seeing the struggles in our community. So I expect budget accountability, I expect policy accountability. In the situations where that isn't happening in the presentation, you can count on me to ask for more information and to be courageous enough to vote no when we need to make sure we're getting the job done right. And my follow-up, my work as council then is to make sure that I better understand the ACLU's issues so that we can address this moving forward and get to our goals around how these funds should be spent.
Thank you. Okay, this is for both mayoral candidates. My understanding is that the City Council has invested substantial money in attracting tourism to Asheville, while neglecting dealing with homelessness and crime. What will you do to improve this discrepancy? Mayor Manheimer, why don't you go first?
Okay, just to be clear, is this our second to last question for the evening?
Yep.
Okay, all right, I know everybody's tired. We're getting close to my bedtime. This is I'm glad somebody asked this question because this is it's a constant information challenge. So in North Carolina, let me just say this, in North Carolina, cities have tourism development authorities. I think there's about, I don't know, 50 or something like that in the state of North Carolina. And they're created by local legislation in Raleigh at the legislature. Every one of them is slightly different, and those statutes state how the money must be spent. So what does that mean for us? What that means is when we have visitors that come and stay here and they stay in a hotel or they stay in an Airbnb, they pay a room tax of 6%. All that money goes to the Tourism Development Authority, which is a separate entity from the city and the county. The city and the county can appoint members and do appoint members to the Tourism Development Authority, but the members have to meet the descriptions in the state statute, like a hotel owner of a hotel over 100 rooms or a hotel owner of a hotel under 100 rooms. It can't just be anybody we want. It has to be somebody who meets the statutory definition. So that's the setup. That is not necessarily the setup in every community. In fact, mayors from other cities in North Carolina who I spend a lot of time with through the North Carolina Metro Mayors sort of giggle at me because their councils do have oversight of how that money is spent. By legislation, 2/3 of those monies, which is now changed just recently because we pushed for it, it went from 75% now to 67%, has to be spent on marketing by the Tourism Development Authority. That US Open advertising of $1.3 million, that was their decision to do that. The other funds, the city and the county and nonprofits can apply for to spend on capital projects related to tourism. That could be a greenway that we enjoy locally, but that also puts what's quote unquote called heads in beds. But the new legislation that just passed that we pushed for gives greater flexibility in how that 1/3 can be spent. And I know I'm like getting into the weeds here, but we are hopeful that it will be able to be spent on things like housing for people who work in the tourism industry and other ways that more directly serve our community. Bottom line, it's completely out of whack. It is completely ridiculous that we have 11 million tourists every year coming here that now have about $40 million in revenues coming into our city. 38% of which, by the way, comes from Airbnb now. 38% countywide of that $40 million room tax is coming from Airbnb. That's how prevalent it is in our community. That we can't use that to clean up downtown. We can't use 1 penny for a street sweeper or to pick up the trash. We can't do that because of this state legislation. And it is a wall, a barrier in Raleigh to try to get that change more than what we already did.
Anything to add to that?
Oh, you betcha. So, as a member of the governance committee, when the legislative agenda, which is a list of asks that we make as a council to our delegation and the General Assembly, it said that we were asking for 33% to be spent locally and 67% to be spent on advertising. And I made the amendment, the ask, and the motion that we would change it to 50%. Why would we not negotiate with what we need? I'm very thankful that my colleagues on council and on the governance committee heard me. As the mayor, I'm committed to keep doing the work till we get what we need. But we can't negotiate with less than what we need. What would it have meant if we had $27 million in occupancy taxes last year, we're projected to have $40.8 million this year? What would it have meant to have $20 million of infrastructure funding available for sidewalks, for urban forestry master plan, for a downtown shuttle circulator that works for the people who live and work here and makes a better place to visit? We have a long way to go. There is responsibility that's shared between the city and the county. The county commission and the city council appoint the members to the TDA. We need folks on the TDA that understand they see the same infrastructure problems that we have. I've reached out to members. The folks that we appoint is really important, and that's part of the process of what accountability looks like. But if we can't get what we need and we can't keep up, we can't keep going the same way, then we are going to have to take really seriously the calls to abolish the TDA and start from scratch. Because we can't keep up with this level of advertising. Some folks come with $700,000 to buy a house. Some folks come with $700 a night for a hotel. Some folks have $7 in a tent. And it's our responsibility to take care of everyone that we invited here, right? So what are we gonna do about it? We don't have the funds to take care. Let's go get our TDA dollars. Let's go get our hotel occupancy taxes and invest in making Asheville and Buncombe County a great place to live, work, and visit.
Thank you, okay. I saved the most complex question that's not directed at anybody in particular for the last. And so I'm gonna let you raise your hand if you dare to answer this question.
We're all agreeing, right?
Okay, I'm curious now. You got me.
You all come back.
If R1 zoning is removed, how do you plan to keep the character of the established older neighborhoods? Who wishes to raise their hand first to tackle this problem? Is it the third rail of politics?
I'll go ahead and jump in. Number one, this kind of came up earlier around property taxes, but y'all didn't ask the city. about property taxes, but we sure participate and are complicit if there's an inequitable property tax structure, because we raise property taxes too. So, we have an issue with Airbnbs. We need to address that, according to what I'm looking at with the Urban 3 proposal, by making sure that if we have residences and residential uses, but there's a commercial use, then we need to make sure that either zoning is compliant or we need to change it to commercial use. But additionally, there's a very important tool that I think we could use. It's a sharp tool. It can cut both ways. If we have a community benefits table that makes sure that we're getting the kind of development that we need, that has green belt development, that protects our tree canopy, that mitigates stormwater, that has deeply affordable housing built in, that has, as Andrew Fletcher brought to the table with the hotel occupancy, or the hotel overlay map, a displacement negative points. I thought that was a great idea. That it could help us to meet our goals. But the reason it's a two-sided sword that is very sharp is if you don't have a public body that's gonna set high standards, that the high points will honor the value of this community and protect our displaced, vulnerable neighbors, and are gonna have a potential harmful impact on our environment, then it's a tool that could cause a lot of harm.
Next, anybody else want to tackle that problem? Nina? Try to stay to 2 minutes, please.
I may live to regret this. R1 zoning has served its purpose in many ways by protecting the value of property of the people who already had the most. Those folks have their stakes already claimed. Changing R1 zoning doesn't mean they have to subdivide their property and build apartment buildings in their backyards or their front yards. They don't have to do that if they don't want to. If they want to extract more value from their land, they can subdivide, they can build, they can rent. So I think the root of this question has to do with the question of infill, which is to say, allowing people the option to build more densely, close into the city center, near utilities and resources, closer to shops, to allow people to make better use of, I hope, an improved public transportation system, to allow people to walk. Can we do that and maintain the character of our neighborhoods? I think we can. I don't think we need to look at this as a win-lose proposition. I think with proper zoning, we can do both. And it's good for the environment.
Just real quick, does whoever asked this question want to reveal themselves? No? Okay. Because I think what the question is asking is what if R1 zoning is legislatively removed? Because that's the conversation I've heard nationally that's sort of trending right now, is that state legislatures would enact carte blanche, a rule change where R1 zoning is removed as an option for cities. R1 zoning means one house on a lot. So one home on a lot. And so there's a lot of concern around this conversation because if you were to do that and you live in a single family neighborhood that is single family home neighborhood, that's an established neighborhood, you'd be thinking, well, does this mean a duplex can go next door or a triplex or whatever on that empty lot that's next door to me? So that's usually what I hear about what I think this question is trying to ask. So first of all, I'm not hearing any rumbling about that happening in North Carolina. But if it were to happen, and I know that the proponents of this concept would say, this helps address affordable housing. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to address what's called the missing middle housing. And missing middle is looking for, not the big giant apartments and not a single home, but what about something in the middle? What about a duplex or a triplex or a quadruplex? We actually have a lot of that established throughout the city and predates zoning, in fact, and is pretty harmonious, but very controversial when you're talking about it being introduced today. So what I would just say as a practical matter, I think it's an important conversation for us to have, which is why City Council funded a study, which is one of our favorite things to do, I know, around how to address missing middle housing. And so we're gonna be getting a set of recommendations around zoning changes that will go out to the community and have a community discussion around before we adopt any changes. But that is a very real concern and something we need to address. But for those who are frantically worried about this, if it were to happen in theory, we still have lot size, setback requirements, and our wonderful steep slope ordinance that has minimum sizes to protect our beautiful steep slopes in Asheville. So those things would still be there. So I'm not too worried about it.
Thank you, Esther. That is, I think you're getting at the heart of it too. This is one of those things I talked about earlier. It's really hard to read a question, hear a question read to you, and not get to ask a follow-up just to get some more clarity on it. But this is a really great one. And I agree, actually, with everything that's been said to some extent or another. I just want to add one point. I grew up in trailer parks all around Asheville because I grew up poor, housing insecurity. I don't live that way now, but I have that experience in my life. And when I hear this question, I'm a big proponent of the missing middle housing theory. And I've seen it. I've been fortunate enough in my life to travel. I've seen the difference it can make. And when I hear people say, can you read that part back? Was it what was it, the character of our community?
Character of established older neighborhoods.
Okay, so I have my follow-up question for whoever would ask that would be, who gets to establish, who gets to define the character of the neighborhood, and at what point are we talking about? Are we talking about 5 years ago, or 5 months ago, 5 years ago, 15, 20, 30, 100 years ago? The character of the neighborhoods in this town have changed dramatically just in my lifetime. I drive to all the places I've lived in Asheville and Buncombe County. Like I said, most of those are trailer parks. There was even a subsidized housing where the federal building now stands, and some people may remember that, some don't. It burned down. My grandmother lived there. The character of this community has been changing in my life. And in fact, I bet some of the people here tonight may have moved here because of the character you've experienced in the last year to 5 years. It wasn't always that way. We can't freeze it in time. What we can do is, as I said earlier, is approach it with balance and a human-first approach. Looking at it and saying, let's do it in a smart, sustainable way that doesn't destroy our existing communities, but honors where we want to move to.
So I think this question is getting at a feeling that has really animated a lot of people in this town. And that is growth. I think we all expect that we're in a growing city and that we're going to see new construction, we're going to see development. I think we all have that basic expectation. But when I see people get really animated and elevate the issue to a political level is when you have growth that is not incremental, that is exponential. And so what I would like to do, I think we need to completely revise, I'm with Nina, I think we need to completely revise our UDO. I think some places are overzoned, I think some places are underzoned. And I think that we should all be at the table to figure that out. But what I do think that we need to see, what I see that is not politically sustainable route to address our needs around housing. We have real needs around housing. The politically unsustainable way to do it is like Charlotte Street. 1-story homes, 5-story building. That's exponential growth. I think that what we can handle as a city that we can actually accomplish without insulting our existing communities is if we embrace incremental growth and abandon exponential growth. And the way we can do that is with a revisit to the UDO. So but I also want to say that I'm an environmental candidate. What that means is that I don't believe in suburban sprawl. What that means is that I'm a quality of life candidate, which means that I don't believe that people should have to drive 45 minutes to work. What that means is that you have to create neighborhoods with jobs that are together. People should be able to live, work, walk to school, to jobs within a reasonable manner. and our entire workforce is being exported right now because we're fighting exponential growth and not getting incremental growth, and we're just stuck between these two places, and we need to get together and agree that we're going to grow in a way that is politically sustainable. Because y'all are gonna throw out anybody who ruins your community. I know that. But what we do have to do is recognize that we're gonna have to accept reasonable changes to be able to actually attack our problems and get some solution here. Because I tell you what, people my age and younger, we need them to work all these jobs in these hotels that have been approved in the past 10 years. Where are they gonna be? We gotta have a community that people can live and work in. The way we get there sustainably, politically, and environmentally is with incremental growth.
Okay. I think,
Can I just do like 30 seconds? But everybody else, so, I think, no. No, I would not support abolishing, or whatever that was phrased, of like getting rid of single-family zoning. I think that is really dramatic. We have a very long list of things that we could and should be doing to have better planning, to have better development ordinances, and to start there feels aggressive and short-sighted. I think that the spirit that policy conversation is bringing up is how do we fit more people of different incomes in a limited amount of space, and I think we should have that conversation. But jumping to that as the solution, I think, is short-sighted and there's no silver bullet, and I think the dramatic and aggressive changes it would have in our community to just say, oh, the market will fix it, I don't think is sufficient. I don't think it will address what we need. Thank you.
you're welcome. That was 40 seconds.
So you should listen.
Am I live anymore, Mike?
I'm sorry?
Hello, hello? Anybody home? There you are. All right.
I turned you off because of some feedback.
Yeah, there's good reasons to.
I got tired of listening. I've been listening to you for 3 months.
Yeah, I know. So, we're at the end. Thank you.
It's over.
Thank you to Mike and Kathy and Bailey and Barbara for doing the majority of the work. They just
Yes.
dumped all the slides on me because I did